Okay, so welcome to the 2020.2 Release Highlights webinar. Today, what we're going to do for you is just give you a run through of the key new features that we see here, the best ones that are coming out in the 2020.2 release, which is the second upgrade of 2020 for NetSuite. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Alan Miles. I'm a Senior Solution Consultant at Eureka Solutions. Been involved in most of the NetSuite projects and customers that we work with. So I've probably spoken to a lot of you before. What we'll go through today is just a little overview of the release itself and the process for some customers that might not have been through this before or haven't been involved in the new release process. And then we'll just take you through what we see as our top 10 highlights of the release in terms of new features that are coming out. There's lots and lots of features available, so we've tried our best to pick out some of the ones that would be most relevant to most customers or some specific customers as well. So first of all, just to give you an overview of the release itself. As you probably know, the NetSuite upgrades automatically every 6 months. So this process allows you to preview your own NetSuite system in the new version. So for our customers, they're all going to be upgraded between the 21st of August, so this Friday, and the 16th of October. And by that point, all customers will be on the latest version for 2020.2. As part of that process, a new release portlet will be added onto your dashboard. And that will allow you to see the date that your account is going to be upgraded on, and also some shortcuts to sneak peeks for the top features that are going to be released. The full release notes, where you'll see every single change that's been made, and also things like test plans and training resources for that version as well. So if that isn't already on your dashboard, you can click on the personalize link on the dashboard and then select new release to add that onto your dashboard as a portlet. To access the preview of your system, which is your system as it was on a certain date, which has already been upgraded to the new version, administrators can request that to be activated by going into Setup, Company and Release Preview. And that can be used then as a sandbox system to test all your key processes and any customizations that you might have and feedback any issues that you might find to us. One thing to point out is, though, as it says all the way through the release notes, that the new features may be subject to change. Those release notes are reviewed weekly, just in case something has to be taken out or potentially something else is added in. So just keep an eye on the release notes to see if anything has changed. With the upgrade starting to go through this weekend, then there's unlikely to be any major changes to what we're looking at today. So this is what the new release portlet looks like. So on your dashboard, this will be added on, and at the top right, you'll be able to see how far away your upgrade is. So in this case, this is one of our demo accounts, which are upgraded quite late in the process. So one thing to point out about today is I won't be able to show you any of these new features. We'll just be going through the highlights of what they're going to be, and we're looking to arrange a follow-up session to go through maybe some of the features in more detail once the release has been rolled out. So you can see here with this account, it's 51 days until the release, the date that it will be updated on, and there's actually a link there to go and set up the release preview account as well. You get some shortcuts and the key features that are going to be released, and then some links to the overview of the features, logging into your release preview, release notes and other guides to the new features as well. So that can all be accessed from the dashboard itself. So this will just be a quick run through what we see the top 10 features being. We can get into more detail with customers individually on any of these that are of interest. And obviously lots of these will be relevant to most customers, and some might be specific to a certain industry or other customers' requirements. So number 10, not a product feature as such, but is a nice feature that's been released to allow customers to have a bit more flexibility of when updates take place in the NetSuite system. So occasionally, on top of the twice yearly upgrades, there are other maintenance that are scheduled for the system, or updates to the system for fixes and other changes to the system that are rolled out on an ad hoc basis. So what this allows it from the next release is that you can request a delay to any scheduled system maintenance that comes through. And initially, though, they're starting just with one type of update, which is the Oracle database upgrade, which tends to take place most years for the database behind the scenes to be updated to the latest version. So now if you get a notification to say that the database is due to be upgraded, there's now a menu where you can go in to see the dates of when that is due, and you'll be able to review that and choose a different date, just to give you a bit more flexibility. So, for example, if the date is scheduled when key people are on holiday or where there's something else happening in the business, then it could be that you could reschedule that particular update. And that's planned to be rolled out for other types of fixes and maintenance as well. One thing to note is that this doesn't apply to the actual major releases, unless you're on one of the premium service tiers that NetSuite offer, where you do actually get to choose an upgrade date. But with the move to Oracle's cloud infrastructure, which some of you might have seen mentioned in some articles before, that's planned over the next 18 to 24 months to move from NetSuite's data centers to Oracle's. And that's one of the features that they plan to be available after that move takes place, for all customers to be able to have a bit more flexibility in the upgrade process. So number 9 relates to prepayments for suppliers. So this is a feature that was actually launched quite recently in the last release, and this allows you to process deposits or payments on account for suppliers. So that's quite a new feature, but is there already at the moment. And this feature has been updated in the 2020 release to give it even more functionality relating to applying payments on account for suppliers. So the first update is that you can now have an approval process for prepayments. So if you've raised a PO for a supplier, haven't received an invoice from the supplier yet, but you need to pay a deposit or a payment up front to maybe send your pro forma invoice, then current functionality allows you to process that as a transaction and make the payment. But with 2020.2, you'll be able to trigger an approval process before that payment is made, specifically for prepayments. And that includes sending the approval to users that maybe only have access through the employee centre to make the approval, because it might be them that's received the request originally from the supplier to make the payment. So that gives a bit more control over those payments, especially if they're being made in advance of an official invoice being received. They also have introduced the ability to copy prepayment transactions, or even to void them if it's created and has to be reversed. There's also now an option to see the prepayment balance in a supplier account separately from the main balance, because that could be a mixture of items that you've prepaid and obviously invoices on the account as well. So for each supplier, you'll now see a prepayment balance to show you what you've made in terms of deposits or payments on account with them separately from the normal payments as well. There's also an option to import the supplier prepayments now, which wasn't available with the initial release as well. So that's just given more flexibility to the supplier management process. Should say as well, if there's any questions, there's a Q&A panel. We'll cover them at the end. So just fire away as we're going through, just put the questions into there and we'll cover them towards the end of the session. So number 8 on the list then, we've got expense attachment security. Again, this was something that was introduced in the previous release to try and bring an extra level of security to receipts and other files that were attached to expense claims by employees. This was something you could always do, but it had to be done manually in terms of setting up a folder per employee and setting some restrictions on who could access that to file your attachments for expenses in case any of those receipts were confidential. So with 2020.1, NetSuite set up the functionality to allow you to define a folder per employee and made sure that their receipts always go into that folder. And the only way that employee can see those files is by going into the expense claim to see them. They would be able to see anybody else's receipts. So that saves the manual task of setting up the folders for those receipts. With 2020.2, they've launched a tool that allows you to migrate all your existing expense attachments that may be in the traditional folder structure to the new folder structure, which will eventually become compulsory for all expense claims. And that makes sure that if you've got receipts and files attached that were put into the system before the update, then they can be moved into the new structure to make sure that the employees can only see their own expenses as well. Number 7 also relates to expenses. So this is a nice feature that allows you to set up expense policies. So what that means on an expense claim that goes through the NetSuite system now, you can set up policies to set rules on what can be claimed for. So with this, I'd imagine this will be extended further in future. But for now, it's to essentially limit the amounts that employees can claim for certain items. So when an employee enters an expense claim now, you can set a criteria for the policy, and that can be based on a date range. So the expense policy could maybe only apply for 1 month or a quarter or another date range, if there's some special rules that have been put in place. They can be based on your different expense categories, so things like mileage, meals, accommodation, transport. So each one of those could be restricted in a different way. And you can choose whether the limit that you put on the expenses is per the overall claim that they're making or per day. So an example would be that you could set a limit just for meals for a certain date range of £25 per day, and the system would prevent the users from actually claiming any higher than that in this case. So again, this will help to speed up the approval process for expenses and the overall process for paying expenses and give better control over that process as well. So number 6 we've picked out is the Suite Analytics Workbook Enhancements. So some of you may be using these already. If not, then we'd encourage you to have a look at them. So this is a whole new reporting engine that was introduced a few releases ago and has been kind of gradually rolled out and updated in every release since. So the analytics workbooks are a way of defining some data that you want to report on in a similar way to setting up saved searches. But then you can build multiple charts and pivot tables of that data source within the NetSuite system instead of exporting the data out of there. So you could have, and you have templates out the box for sales and purchases and other functions for reporting on NetSuite data. So the updates have been coming out gradually to this module, and there's some pretty major ones in 2020.2. So these include the ability to include multiple data sets in one workbook. So a workbook being a collection of reports and charts that are driven off of, up till now, a single data set. So that could be sales transactions or opportunities or POs, or just customers or suppliers or any other data in the system. So now the update allows you to have multiple data sets. So you could have one workbook in the system that would be combined sales and purchase data or actual and forecast data if you're using opportunity tracking, to allow you to create a reporting or a set of reports that allows you to see charts and pivot tables based on multiple types of data in one place, instead of having to set up multiple workbooks for each one. So that's, again, pretty powerful in terms of making sure everybody's got the information they need at their fingertips to analyse the data going through the system. There's also some smaller updates, like improvements to the formula builder to make the criteria a bit easier to define for the reporting workbooks. You can also now add table views to your dashboard. So up until now, the analytics workbooks, which were made up of charts like area, line and bar charts or stacked charts, or pivot tables, they could be added onto the dashboard. But you can actually use analytic workbooks just to define a table view, so a list of data that's got a set of criteria and formulas and things in it. Again, very similar to saved searches. So those data-driven table views can now be added to dashboards as well to give you another view of the data. There's also some filtering improvements. So previously, if you applied a filter, then it could apply to all the charts within a workbook. So now you can apply chart-specific filters in certain areas that you couldn't before. And the next one actually is a bit of a bugbear for us. We use this internally as well. Once you've defined your workbook, you maybe have multiple tabs for each report or pivot table. They've included the ability to reorder that now, so you can change the order that the charts appear in. And there's also been some links to help videos added to the analytics pages. So when you're working on that, then you can shortcut to the help pages and some videos that talk you through how to set these up. So this is in its own is a huge feature, and really, as I say, worth having a look at if you haven't experienced that so far, because it can make a difference to your reporting process with having to take less data out of the system to produce pivots and charts in the system. Number 5 relates to supply planning. So this is relevant to product-based businesses who might have an element of demand planning or MRP. So this is a revamp of the demand planning functionality in the system, and demand planning is an optional module. And this is functionality they've taken and essentially improved and changed the way that the system deals with demand planning and supply planning. So this is a whole new module on its own, which provides pretty much the same functionalities as the demand planning, but in a more flexible and interactive way. So with this one, you can define criteria for how you want to plan your demand forecasts and supply plans around it. So things like the planning horizon you want to use, the items, locations, and rules around that. You'll be able to compare multiple plans, so you can have a look at different scenarios. You could copy it and then tweak it slightly to give you a bit of kind of what-if analysis to say, well, if demand increases by 10% or reduces by 10%, then how does that compare to the baseline forecast for our demand plan? And then we can create different plans for the same item. So that was one of the limitations of the current demand planning modules, that you can only have one forecast at any one time for each product. So now if you can create multiple ones for each product, you can start to do the what-if analysis to compare the different scenarios or different rules in there. Once you've run through that process with the forecasting, then allows you to generate supply plans, which would be the purchases that you need to make to meet the predicted demand. That all then goes into what they call the supply planning workbench, which is a workspace where you can actually review the output from those processes and any warnings or exception messages. And that's where you would firm up your orders, release the orders, and create the change orders, maybe if the demand forecast has changed, to update the process. So this is one we're still kind of looking into and getting up to speed with, because it's pretty major change. So it might be one that we do a focused webinar on once we have gone through the training and seen this in action as well. Okay, so number 4, more generic for all customers. This is to do with bank statement imports and to do with bank reconciliation. So this new feature will allow you to auto-create transactions when you import a bank statement. So this is again taking away a manual process. So if you import your bank statement into the system, which is standard functionality, based on various different statement formats, which we'll come to in the next point. So you can automate the process of creating and matching transactions now when you import your bank statement. What that allows you to do is set up rules so that when you import the bank statement, then it would create and match, reconcile the following transactions, which are basically any deposits or charges on bank accounts, and any charges or refunds for credit card accounts. So again, if you're importing a credit card statement, then it can pick that up as well. So that will find any transactions that can't be matched that meet the rules, that meet one of those criteria. So it has to be a deposit or a charge. So it might be an interest charge, or a late payment fee, those kind of charges that you maybe wouldn't have recorded in NetSuite yet. If they match the rules and they don't match a transaction in NetSuite, then the system can create those transactions for you and automatically match them together for reconciliation. So just cutting out a manual process that you maybe have to add them on the fly at the moment when you're doing your bank rec. It doesn't automatically post those transactions as a review process. So you review all the matched transactions, and you can authorize the ones that NetSuite has decided to create automatically before they're actually posted to the GL. So that should hopefully be a time saver for anybody that wants to import their transactions and create them automatically. So number 3, as I mentioned, also relates to the bank statement import. What this allows you to do is automate the process now. So again, as of the previous release, or actually the one before that, in 2019.2, NetSuite introduced the ability to connect to a secure file transfer protocol, an SFTP location that would be provided by your bank. So what that would mean would be that you could connect directly to an online location. The bank would download the statement for you to that location, and you would point NetSuite to that file to import your statement. So it meant there was no download of a file or any transfer of information locally on people's machines for bank statements. But that process was still manual. So with 2020.2, they've introduced the option to automate that. So it's the same connection method using an SFTP connection. So your bank has to provide the download of the statement to that location, connect NetSuite to that, and then once per day it can go and check for any files that are in that location that match a specified file format based on a naming convention. It will then import that in as your statement that can be reconciled with the NetSuite data. So it'll be once per day as the schedule at the moment. And there's various, these are the supported formats are the same as the ones that you can import into the system at the moment manually. So you've got your OFX and QFX, the BAI2, and other ones there as well. If there's a format that you have that doesn't match those default ones, then their custom mappings can be configured as well to automate that. One thing to look out for though is when we have discussed this with our customers that have looked at connecting to the SFTP, some banks only offer that as part of a higher level of their service or would charge a setup fee for it. So it's something to check with your bank just to see if they offer the option to connect via SFTP. And if they do, just to check if there's any cost implication at the bank side as well. So number 2, this update relates to intercompany. So if you have multiple companies that you're running from a financial perspective within the NetSuite system, and you have an element of intercompany transactions and trading between the companies, then this is an update to that process, which again should hopefully cut down some manual effort and make your life easier if you're managing intercompany transactions. So the areas that they've improved here, that they've brought in, the first one is the ability to define settings for intercompany transactions. And also default markup rates. So if you are processing cross-subsidiary transactions and you always have a markup that's applied to them for any cross charges, then that can be defaulted in the system and picked up when those transactions are processed instead of having to do that manually. There's then a process for automating the cross charges that need to be generated. So based on the transactions going through the system, there's now a step added to the period end checklist that you should use at the moment for doing your month end. And that's where you would normally do things like the revaluation of foreign currency transactions and eliminating intercompany transactions. So the new step here will run through transactions in the system that have been flagged as intercompany and will automatically create the cross charges with the markups as well. So, and one of the scenarios for that might be where one of your subsidiaries takes an order for a customer, but another subsidiary actually fulfills that order. So there would be an element of a cross charge for that service. So those types of postings can now be created automatically based on the rules that are set up in the system. That would create the intercompany debtors and creditors as part of that process. And the next new feature that helps with that is then the intercompany netting. So there's a way to net off those intercompany balances and create settlement transactions as well. And then the other one is transaction pairing. So this allows you to then have a process of matching intercompany transactions. So again, if an invoice has been posted for an intercompany transaction, then that can be paired against the other side of that in terms of the intercompany transactions, which gives you a bit more of manual reconciliation to match transactions together, but that means less time spent trying to reconcile transactions at the month end, because you can do the matching throughout the month as the transactions are posted and can be matched to each other as well. So that should be a pretty big feature for anybody who's got a lot of intercompany trading in particular, or where the services and products that you provide are actually maybe fulfilled across different companies in the group as well. Okay, so we got to number 1. This has been a feature that we've been waiting for quite a while. It was previously available, but it was an add-on bundle that could be applied to customers' accounts, which was a bit of customization that the NetSuite support team had carried out. So that was available to be installed, and that's been deployed by some of our customers. It could also be achieved by some bespoke development, again, which we carried out for some customers. But as of 2020.2, then consolidated invoicing is now a standard feature, which they call invoice groups. So what this actually was the number 1 most requested feature in the Suite Ideas. The Suite Ideas being a request list for features that's available for customers to vote for. So anything we get through our support team that isn't a standard feature, then we can add customers' names against it to vote for that to be added into the product. For quite a few years, this has been the number 1 most requested feature. So now with 2020.2, you'll be able to group multiple invoices together that you've generated for a customer. So if you've got a customer who's placed 5 orders in a month and they just want one invoice for all 5 orders, then unfortunately it hasn't gone all the way to actually allow you to just create one invoice for multiple sales orders. But if you follow the process that you would do just now to create, in that case, maybe 5 different invoices for the customer, you'll now be able to group them into a single invoice and send the customer a single invoice detailing all the orders or individual invoices that relates to. So it means for the customer's perspective, they get a single invoice with detail of everything. So it's cutting down on their admin and also the visibility for the finance team as well in terms of what's been invoiced is increased as well. So the group invoice itself is a non-posting transaction. It's purely a printed layout of an invoice that can be sent to the customer, which includes the totals from the individual invoices that have actually been posted to the GL. So the individual invoices are still the ones that impact your financials. Once you've sent a group invoice, then you can receive a payment from the customer and you can apply it to the group invoice, which will then filter it down to the individual invoices. And also when you send a statement to the customer, then your group invoices can appear on that rather than individual ones. So again, everybody's working from the same reference number for the invoice, and the amounts will all tie back to the consolidated invoice that you've created. So that's going to be a big feature for anybody that has that scenario where they have to invoice multiple things for a customer and introduce that as well. For the customers that have already used the Suite app that was available, we'll just need to look into the migrating onto the standard feature to make sure you're using the feature that will be maintained moving forwards. Okay, so that is our top 10. Hopefully that's been interesting. As I say, the release notes will give you every single feature in there. We've just tried to pick out the ones that might have the biggest impact on time saving and things that would move you forward in terms of processing transactions and other features within NetSuite. There's plenty of other enhancements to areas such as the Suite Commerce for the e-commerce side, for the development side, and every other module within NetSuite has been updated. So please have a look at the release notes and see if there's any that are of interest. One thing to point out as well that's coming soon, you may see within the release notes a reference to Suite People. And Suite People is NetSuite's HR solution, which is built completely on the NetSuite platform. This has been teased for quite a while now. It was launched in the US as a product about 2 years ago, and has been gradually getting ready for other international markets such as the UK. So that has been piloted now in the UK and is starting to be getting ready for launch fully. So again, once we have a bit more information on the UK specific features and the functions that will be available in that, then we will be arranging some sessions. But again, we're happy to speak to individual customers if it's something that may be of interest. But that should give you the option to run some HR processes within the NetSuite system, such as reviews and time off tracking and things like that. So we will be in touch with more information once we have it.